The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept sipping it, out of habit more than anything else. The kitchen was quiet, save for the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old wood floor beneath my chair. Outside, the sky was that dull gray Missouri kind of overcast, the kind that makes time feel slower. Then came the ping. I picked up my phone, not expecting anything important. But it was from him. "Dad. Don't call or come over. We're done." Just that. 8 words. No punctuation. No explanation. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, like my brain needed to reboot. It felt like someone had punched the wind out of me, but I didn't flinch. I'd been through this dance before. I typed back. "Got it." Pressed send. Nothing more. Not because it didn't hurt, but because if there's one thing I'd learned, it's that showing pain only gave them more power. I'd built my life around the illusion of being unshakable. Even when I was breaking inside, I smiled through it. That's what daughters like me were raised to do. But even as I sat there, hands trembling slightly, something different stirred in me. Not confusion this time, clarity. I whispered out loud, to no one, "This time, I won't chase." It's strange how silence molds you. Being the youngest meant I was the one expected to disappear into the background. Help out. Don't talk back. Keep the peace. I was the peacekeeper with a side of resentment. I remember catching pieces of conversations I was never meant to hear. "She's just too sensitive. Always makes things bigger than they are." One time, I'd brought up applying to college out of state. The response? Mom needed help at home. My brother, meanwhile, got a brand new Ford that year and a handshake with pride. It's not just what's said, it's what's never said. For years, I played the fixer. The one who smoothed over Thanksgiving blow-ups, the one who texted first after fights. I was a buffer for their dysfunction. My therapist once told me, "You mistake silence for strength, but silence is just buried pain." I laughed when she said that. But now, it rings too true. Anger doesn't always explode. Sometimes it settles in, like dust on windowsills, quiet but impossible to ignore. 2 months ago, we had dinner at Dad's. Same house, same stiff-backed chairs, same expectations. "Diana, can you make the potatoes?" "Diana, can you set the table?" Nobody asked what I'd been up to. Not really. My sister-in-law chuckled at my outfit, some passive-aggressive remark about artsy types. My brother was toasted for his big promotion, and I had just won an award at work. Not that anyone brought it up. When I tried to share, Dad waved me off. "That's not real stress, sweetheart." I swallowed it. All of it. Just smiled and nodded, like always. But later, in my car, parked under that flickering street lamp, I cried so hard I gave myself a headache. Something was shifting, not just in them, but in me. After the text, I couldn't sit still. I wrapped myself in my coat and walked. The cold wasn't just on my skin, it was in my chest. That kind of ache that comes with familiar rejection. I played back the last few months, scanning for landmines. Maybe it was the time I told him I couldn't sort through his insurance forms. Or when I didn't show up for brunch because I had a migraine. Or when I posted that picture of me and Mom, before the divorce. My mind spiraled. Had I not always answered his calls? Hadn't I driven him to doctor's appointments when my siblings couldn't be bothered? Hadn't I been the one who remembered everyone's birthdays? Then the voice inside, low and tired, said, "How many chances have you given people to treat you like you don't matter?" That's when the tears came. I didn't want them to. But they did. Quiet, angry ones. I stood still under a street lamp, breathing through the sting. Back home, I thought about calling my sister. But we hadn't really talked in months. Not since she told me, "You just take things too personally." And my brother? He was too busy being the golden child. I scrolled through photos on my phone. There I was, in the corner of the family reunion shot, half cut off. Not one person had noticed. I put the phone down. Silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. But for once, I didn't try to fill it. I just sat, let it stretch. At exactly 11:55 p.m., I found myself back at the kitchen table. The light above buzzed faintly. I pulled open the drawer and took out the envelope. Yellowed edges. My handwriting, looping and careful, stared back at me. It was a letter I'd written to him 7 years ago. After the first time he told me I was a disappointment. I never sent it. I didn't open it now. Just held it. Let it sit between my fingers like a truth I wasn't ready to read. Sometimes, I whispered, the best way to scream is to stay silent and leave. I powered on my laptop. The screen lit up the dark room. And I began typing. I hadn't touched that envelope in 7 years. It had moved with me twice. Sat in drawers, hidden between pages of books, tucked away like a secret too heavy to read and too fragile to throw away. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the silence after Dad's text. Maybe it was the cold truth finally pushing through my ribs. I slid my finger under the flap and peeled it open slowly, like unwrapping a wound. The paper inside was folded neatly, still crisp. My handwriting was smaller back then, neater, almost apologetic. I unfolded it, smoothed it flat against the table. I'm not angry, it began. I'm just tired of pretending this is love. I read every word, every line I had poured out on that night years ago, after that miserable family trip. We'd gone to Branson, supposed to be bonding time. I remembered that dinner clear as day, my brother's wife making some smug joke about me still being single at 30, and the way my father had chuckled, looked away, said nothing. I wrote about the humiliation, the loneliness, how I had smiled anyway, then locked myself in the hotel bathroom and cried until I threw up. Reading it now, I didn't feel angry. I felt like I'd found a debt that never got paid. All that pain I'd tucked away neatly. A balance sheet of silent betrayals. I sat back in my chair and stared at the letter. My fingers curled around the edge like I needed to hold it tighter to remember I was still here. Next to the envelope was an old USB drive I didn't recognize at first. I had tucked it in with the letter, must have been from my college days. On impulse, I plugged it into the laptop. The folder opened slow, but there it was, voice memo _March 2016.wave. I clicked play. The voice that came through the speakers was mine, but younger, shakier, more tired than I remembered being. I was crying. Not loud, but that raw, gasping kind of cry you try to muffle with a pillow. I don't know why I thought this would be different, my voice said. Maybe if I just disappeared, they'd finally see me. I sat completely still. The air in the kitchen felt heavier. I'd forgotten I ever said that. Forgotten I ever felt that far gone. And yet, part of me still did. That recording hit me in the chest like a memory I hadn't earned yet. I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't cry in bathrooms or beg for crumbs of acknowledgement. But I hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be invisible. I clicked stop. And for a long moment, I just sat there with my hands on the table, eyes closed. I started asking myself why I never sent the letter. I knew the answer before the question even finished forming. I didn't want to make things worse. I was always too intense, too emotional, too much. If I had mailed that letter, it would have been twisted into a tantrum. Another strike against me. Another reason to be left off the group chat. So, I chose silence. I chose to keep the peace by sacrificing my own. But now, silence felt like a cage. A punishment. A war where I was the only one bleeding. You think you're keeping the peace, I whispered, but you're just locking yourself in a quiet war. I wasn't going to write anything I couldn't say out loud anymore. I pulled out one of my old journals. The leather cover was cracked, corners curled. I flipped through the pages, scanning for patterns. Every couple of years, some eruption. A fight, a blow-up, a cold shoulder, followed by my retreat. Like clockwork. One page mentioned the time my wedding RSVP mysteriously got lost. Another, when I got laid off and no one even called, but that same weekend, my family threw a gender reveal party for my brother's third kid. It wasn't one moment. It was the sum total of dozens of slights that, when added together, painted a picture I didn't want to see. Dad's text hadn't come out of nowhere. It had just finally said the quiet part out loud. I opened a new document on my laptop. Typed slowly. Deliberate. I've always been here. You just stopped seeing me. I looked at it for a long time. Then I closed the laptop without hitting send. Not out of fear, but because this wasn't about them anymore. This was mine. I printed it, folded it carefully, slid it into the same journal where I'd buried everything else. Not for closure. For proof. The sky outside had gone from black to a deep, dusty blue. Morning creeping in on silent feet. I brewed tea. Not coffee this time, I needed something calmer. I sat by the window and held the warm mug in both hands. The house was still quiet. But this silence didn't feel like punishment. I thought about the kind of woman I wanted to be now. Not the fixer. Not the ghost in the family album. Not the one who made herself small just to fit. Someone once said, don't fight for a seat at a table where you're always the main course. I understood that now. I smiled, small, but real. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. I arrived at my Austin studio just as the rooftop lights dimmed and the early morning hush settled in. The windows were tall and narrow, the light cool and lean. I flipped on the HVAC fan to break the stillness, small sound, but enough to steady the room. I needed quiet. I needed space. My inbox pinged. I froze for a moment and clicked open the attachment. A photo of a leather-bound notebook. My mother's handwriting on the front, Rowena, potential to lead. The email subject line was simple, you weren't the only one my mother once valued. My pulse beat twice slow, like I'd forgotten parts of myself I was still owed. I opened the scan. Pages filled with notes I never saw, words I never heard. And the seating chart for next week's gala, pinned under the heading, Family Lead, mine listed instead as, Guest, Freelance Designer. The floor under me seemed to drop a hair. This wasn't about one mistake. It was the pattern. I went back, 5 years to San Antonio. Company retreat. I pitched a lobby redesign, sustainable, forward-thinking. Dad listened, then looked at Rustin. Let's keep it simple. The investors don't like risky. The handshake next morning, Rustin's name printed on the cover. Applause. My design, my sweat, my quiet. The phrase drifted to mind, invisible contribution still builds the castle. I said it out loud. My voice soft, but steady, I won't stay invisible anymore. I glanced at the gala flyer pinned beside my workstation, Sorel Legacy 50 years. My role, consultant designer. I called my sister's voicemail. Hey, just checking if you'll be at the dinner. I'll be there early. I didn't wait for her response. I left the phone off, grabbed the silk scarf mother gave me once, a symbol she said meant, opportunity knitted together. I touched it, thought, this is my inheritance, not his. The regret faded. A quiet resolution rose. I printed the notebook pages and the gala seating chart. I stacked them, labeled the box, for my records. I journaled the line, I will attend the gala, not to ask for a seat, but to claim one. My laptop bag packed with contracts, Dallas client details, my independent project. No longer the family side note. I poured iced tea, not the cold cup I carried in chapter 1, but deliberate. Sip slow. I glanced at my phone, 7:58 a.m. 30 minutes to leave Austin suburbs for a life I was ready to define. I stepped outside. Morning sunlight caught the edge of the studio glass door. My phone buzzed, another calendar pop-up, Family Gala. Your name, Rowena Sorel, category, guest. I paused, breath caught. I looked at the door. I looked at the street. I didn't feel angry. I felt something far sharper, peace. They still didn't see me. Maybe that was okay. I opened the door. I walked out. I stepped away from the roar of the ballroom, through the soft hum of the hotel hallway where voices dipped into low laughter and quiet deals. The lights were dim, the carpet muted, and the world inside felt distant. I pushed open the door and found myself at the leftover bulletin board, sticky notes from staff reminders, announcements for late-night snacks, and in the middle a framed map of the Sorel family table. One seat had a cloth draped over the name slot, Rowena Sorel, family member. I paused. The name was there, sort of, but hidden. One simple move, one silent message. If your name's listed and you don't sit, you don't belong. That old rule of Dad's echoed in my skull. I traced the name with my finger. Then I folded my arms and walked back inside as he raised his glass to the next generation, Rustin standing proud. I raised mine too, but said nothing. Inside I thought, I'm not the next generation. I'm the present. My father's voice cut clear. My daughter Rowena has opted out of the company's next phase. A pause. A silent shock flew through the room. Rustin smirked. Nadine's clap echoed slow. My heart raced, not for anger, but for recognition that yes, they were ready to rewrite history without me. I stayed seated, steadying my breathing. I remembered the nights I stayed until after midnight, editing budgets, redesigning offices, doing what I never told anyone. They saw the canvas, they ignored the painter. My glass emptied. I didn't stand. I walked to the bathroom. My reflection was calm but my chest burned. I whispered. I never opted out. I was excluded. In the mirror a tear slid quietly. I caught it with my hand and let it drop. I replayed the moment in San Antonio years ago, watching Rustin's name on the plaque, hearing applause meant for someone else. My silence then had been mistaken for approval. And how many of us had done that? I straightened my jacket and told myself, I will not wait for permission. I will be seen on my own terms. Returning to the balcony, I stood above the city, lights shimmering like broken promises. My phone flickered. One missed call from Verna, 2 texts from Rustin, none from Dad. I didn't answer. I scribbled in my notebook, if they're going to erase me, I'll write myself into history. The iced water in the glass felt real, cool, clean, deliberate. The invitation didn't fit me, but I could change the script. I exhaled and stepped into the night. I woke before the sun. The studio was still. No music, no phone buzzing, just the soft churn of the HVAC and the thin streak of light sliding under the blinds. I sat up without hesitation. My feet hit the hardwood and my body knew, today had weight. My hand rested on the edge of the desk, fingers brushing against the drawer. I didn't open it yet. Instead, my mind slipped backward, uninvited. Years ago, hospital lights, wires, the beep of machines. Rustin lay there with his eyes half shut, tubes threading from his arms. Dad stood stiff in the corner, Mom quietly sobbing beside him. And me? I was signing forms, arranging payments, calling in favors. The family had tapped out. I covered what their pride wouldn't. I saved him. And still, I wasn't even worth a line in the thank you speeches. They called him responsible. All I got was the silence. I whispered into the stillness, not again. I poured my coffee, hot, black, steady. Today wasn't about anger. It was a decision. A door I'd close so I could finally walk through another. I opened the drawer. There it was, a clean check from my business account. I wrote it slowly. Pay to the order of Sorrel Legacy Development. Amount, $250,000. Memo line. Final capital, Rowena Sorrel. My signature flowed without a pause. I stared at it for a beat. Let them see it. Let them feel it. I tore the check from the pad, slipped it into a white envelope, and sealed it without a second thought. No note, no explanation. By the time I got downtown, the city had started moving. People on bikes, coffee in hands, voices echoing in early meetings. I parked a block from the bank and walked the rest. Inside, it smelled like cold air and old pens. The teller asked how she could help. I passed the envelope forward. Deposit this, please, I said. Then, before she could turn, I added, and place a stop payment on it at noon. Her eyes flicked up. Are you sure? I smiled politely. Yes. That's the last check they'll ever cash in my name. I walked out lighter in my pocket, heavier in my chest, but not weighed down. Anchored. I wasn't shutting the door. I was unlocking it for myself. Back in the car, I let my phone vibrate against the console. Voicemail from Dad. Then a text from Rustin. You'll regret this. I didn't open either. I stared out at my studio window. The place I built with long hours and missed holidays, while they hosted ribbon cuttings and printed plaques. Regret? It wouldn't be mine. I drove across town to a small cafe, ordered an iced tea, and found a table near the window. I stirred the glass, ice clinking against the sides, and thought about what I wanted. Not payback. Recognition. Not drama. Dignity. By early afternoon, I was back in the studio. The light slanted across my desk as I opened my laptop. My latest design, the boutique hotel in Dallas, was live on their site. And this time, my name was listed. Not Sorrel Legacy. Just me. I forwarded the signed contract to the client with a simple note, excited to move forward. Best, Rowena. No family logo. No attached strings. I stood up, stretched, and looked around the room. Then I said out loud, to no one in particular, if the ledger always read his name. Then let it read mine now. I packed my laptop and stepped out into the Austin air. It wasn't warmer, but it was clearer. I walked into the conference room at the Sorel Legacy headquarters in Fort Worth with a clear notebook and a slim USB drive in my pocket. The lights were low, the chairs arranged around a glossy table, and familiar faces already settling in. I didn't hesitate. I didn't doubt. I knew what I was carrying. I placed the USB beside the laptop, nothing dramatic. But in that quiet click of connection, everything changed. I watched documents upload to the screen. The contract stared back at the room. Rowena M. Sorel, signed 3 years earlier. And then, the public version, Rustin's name in bold. Murmurs rose before my father caught them with a glance. I met his eyes. I said, "The lead designer, investor and signer was me. The invoice says, Rowena M. Sorel. Why does the plaque say otherwise?" The air shifted. Titles matter only when they're true. Momentum awakened. The CFO fumbled his papers. Rustin shifted in his seat. I quoted my mentor in that moment, "You don't inherit a title. Titles either honor you, or they lie about you." I pressed play on the clip, silent image then voiceover, and led by Rustin Sorel. The board froze. Their shields cracked. My mother avoided my gaze, my brother's face colored. I leaned forward and said softly, "When you hide someone in plain sight, you aren't protecting them, you're erasing them." The silence roared. My father asked, with calm that felt empty, "Why now?" I looked at him evenly. "Because now I'm free." Rustin called me out, "You're making a scene." I replied, "I'm making it real." A board member muttered it was a family matter. I answered, "Family matters when members matter." The room felt heavy, full of invisible weights I'd carried. I noticed Mom's hands shaking in the back row, she who had held midnight similar secrets. My heart steadied. I wasn't fighting for their approval, I was reclaiming my standing. I closed the laptop. I stood. I looked at everyone in the room and said, "I've done more than stay silent. I've built value. If you refuse to recognize me, I'll build from outside." I handed them the USB. "Keep it." My brother shouted, "You'll regret this." I didn't turn back. I walked out. Outside, the Fort Worth skyline glowed under night clouds. I breathed in deep and thought, they lost me. They gained nothing. I stepped into the street with the world behind me and a clear path ahead. No shield, no compromise, only the truth. Morning light poured through the wide glass panels of my new office in Manhattan. Boxes were still half open, a rug curled on one end, but the skyline out my window didn't wait for things to be perfect. Neither did I. I was halfway through my first sip of coffee when my phone rang. It was Thora Vance. I hadn't heard from her in years. Her voice didn't stumble. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said, "I couldn't believe they took credit for your work." I froze, cup still near my lips. Thora had been in the room. She'd seen the early drafts, the late nights, the plans scribbled on napkins and flipped whiteboards. I'd always thought she looked past me. But not today. I asked her to meet, 20 minutes. My gut said this was it. This was the hinge moment. In the elevator, I whispered to myself, "It's not about proving you're right. It's about making them know you were right." The quote sat in my mouth like steel. Back in the office, phones started ringing. I ignored them. The press feed link blinked on the second monitor. A client presentation sat ready. I was about to walk 2 lines, truth and consequence. I paced once, adjusted the light. On the screen behind me, Sorel Design Solutions, lead by Rowena Sorel. No middle initials, no borrowed names. Just mine. The logo glowed soft but clear. I clicked into the client session. Slideshow live. Then, on another tab, the press link activated. A countdown hovered in the corner, 9:59 a.m. By 10:03, I was mid-sentence, speaking calmly about custom textures and regional sustainability when I pivoted. "Before we proceed, I want to address something." I clicked to share my screen and pulled up the transfer document. On display. Clear, timestamped, notarized. The shift of asset control, from my name to Rustin's, without authorization, without signature. The client paused mid-nod. "Wait," he said, "that's not what we were told." In the background, a press assistant's mic picked up a sharp exhale. My hand didn't shake. I pointed to the footer. Transferred from Rowena M. Sorel to Rustin S. Sorel. This was funding I provided. This was design I delivered. This is the transfer you never heard about. I let the screen hang there. They replaced a name with a headline, I said. Today, I return the favor, with fact. No one interrupted. No one offered defense. Just the low murmur of an industry realizing it might have clapped for the wrong face. I ended the meeting without a flourish. Closed the laptop. Leaned back. The view behind me had shifted. It looked less like an escape and more like arrival. Emails flooded in. A few from legal firms. Others from smaller studios saying, "We always knew." But I didn't read them all. What stayed with me was something I'd read years ago, tucked inside a book I'd picked up on accident. You may be the victim of the path you walked, but now you must choose the direction. I stood, walked to the glass. The city felt like it paused for me. Like it knew. I wasn't going back to Texas tonight. That much was clear. My home wasn't where my name had been ignored. It was where it echoed, clean and unburdened. Then, just as I turned back toward my desk, the phone buzzed again. Notification bar. Breaking story. Sorrel legacy under investigation over asset transfers. I smiled. Quiet, firm. Truth doesn't scream. It waits, then lands. The road stretched like a quiet thread under a fading fall sky. I left Manhattan before sunrise, and by mid-afternoon, the skyline had disappeared behind me, glass and ambition traded for open land and memory. The GPS said 5 hours left to the ranch, but I was already halfway to a different life. Every mile peeled something away. The noise, the weight, the ache to prove. I passed towns that once felt too small for my dreams: Temple, Waco, Gatesville. Each one brought back flashes of who I used to be, a 17-year-old girl standing in the yard waiting for her father's truck to turn down the road, waiting to be invited in, waiting to matter. I caught myself rehearsing what I might say if he opened the door. But I stopped. Some goodbyes don't need words. Not every closure needs an audience, I whispered to myself. For the first time, I believed it. By the time I reached the ranch, the sun was low, painting the fields in amber. The gate stood just as I remembered, but this time, a heavy chain ran through the latch. A new sign hung from the post: no trespassing. My name, once carved in a small plaque beside it, was gone. Scraped off. Replaced by rust. I didn't need to check records to know the truth. Dad had retitled the land. My inheritance was now someone else's property. I leaned against the car hood, breathing in the scent of hay and dust. The air was thick with the kind of silence that holds both peace and heartbreak. From my bag, I pulled a letter I'd written months earlier but never sent. The first line still stung. I used to wait for your approval. I don't anymore. I read it quietly, then folded it back. Maybe it was never meant for him. Maybe it was meant for me. Home is not where they welcome you, I thought, but where you feel no need to explain yourself. A car slowed near the gate. A woman stepped out, Grace, the neighbor who used to bring over casseroles when Mom was sick. She smiled, surprised. "Rowie," she said softly, "you're her daughter, aren't you?" I nodded. She opened her trunk and lifted out a small box. "My dog dug this up near the fence," she said. "Thought you might want to see." Inside were letters, old, yellowed, edges soft from time. My breath caught when I saw the handwriting. It was Mom's. Grace hesitated, then added, "She planted wild roses there before she passed. Said they were for you." I sat on the gravel and opened the first envelope carefully. "Rowie, I hope one day you'll return strong, not for them, but for yourself." The words hit harder than any confrontation could. I didn't sob. I just let the warmth of them reach the cold places that years of silence had built. Those letters were her voice, buried but not gone. Proof that I had mattered all along. When Grace left, I stayed. I walked to the bluff behind the property, the same place I used to write in my journals as a teenager. I took a few rose petals from the box and let them fall into the wind. They floated for a moment, then disappeared into the valley. I opened my phone and typed a single note: "I choose peace." Not because they earned forgiveness, but because I earned freedom. That was my decision, my final choice. I wasn't going to fight for what was never freely given. I called my lawyer, not to contest the estate, but to remove my name from the title completely. To let go without permission. Some inherit legacies, I said into the phone, others inherit the strength to build their own. The air turned cooler as I walked back to the car. I called Thora next. "Let's do it," I said. "The Design Institute. I'm ready." Her laugh on the other end sounded like relief. That night, I confirmed the event booking from undervalued to unshaken. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. About helping women like me, the ones who gave everything quietly, who needed someone to remind them it wasn't too late to start again. Driving toward the main road, I saw a young woman by the shoulder, backpack slung low. I slowed, rolled down the window. Need a lift? She hesitated, then smiled. Are you someone famous? I shook my head. No, just someone who made it out the long way. She climbed in, and we drove off, the radio humming low. I didn't look back. In the rearview mirror, the ranch shrank until it vanished into the haze. For once, I didn't feel left behind. I was the one moving forward.